Hey everyone, Ken here. Wanted to find a way to keep the conversation going. Thought this might be a fun way to not just share what I've been thinking lately, especially with the current shift in kind of the market, but also wanted to make sure that we're at Product404 continuing to kind of add value and give you guys resources for thinking through the problems that we face every day. So based on kind of the question I asked of what would be most interesting, there seemed to be a lot of interest in general around organizing value streams, strategizing around that. As I started to think through what this might look like and what we would kind of go through, became a little bit of an analysis of what a value stream is, and then kind of how that plays into your overall strategy as a business. So we'll kind of dive in there. So if we start to think about like what a value stream is, there are a lot of definitions, especially if you look in the kind of like modern business architecture documentation. I don't know that I really agree with a lot of the definitions of a value stream. I think a lot of it, it's certainly helpful in that articulation to kind of explain how value is delivered to customers. But in my mind, the value stream is really the connection from the business to the customer, and it's the real value you deliver. But it also has to deliver value to the business. And so when you look at value streams out in the wild, they fall into three archetypes. So there's transactions. And so a transaction value stream would be monetizing the delivery of a good or service between two parties. An example of this might be a marketplace, Airbnb, Uber. You're effectively connecting supply and demand and monetizing that through a platform. So you've got a transactional value stream, and you monetize that. You can also look at a lot of fintech, financial services companies, payments in general. They're monetizing that transaction stream, and they're delivering value to both the business and the consumer because they're enabling that. The second kind of archetype of a value stream is going to be productivity. These are going to be your, standard web apps, SaaS solutions, things that help you get something done. They solve a problem. This isn't just for B2B. This is also for B2C. So if you're enabling your customer to do something, you are a productivity value stream. You're giving them the ability to kind of complete that job to be done, as it were. And the last value stream is kind of an attentional value stream. So if you think about Facebook, social media, you are capturing attention and then monetizing that attention. So the more time, the more, the deeper the interaction that you're able to create, the more effectively you're able to monetize that. And that, again, could be just number of impressions, but a lot of, I think, what the attention value streams as of late are focusing on is the depth of that engagement. Do I actually connect with the content that I'm looking at? Am I influenced by whatever advertisements or product placement might be joined with that value stream? So typically, monetizing attention is advertisements based. You could, in theory, have a social media solution that wasn't monetized through attention, but was monetized through a subscription, right? And in that case, I would say that probably falls more into a productivity value stream. A lot of this is not just the value you're delivering to the customer, but the nature of the business and how you're monetizing that. So again, just a couple of ways that I try to think about value streams. I think a lot of your OKRs, a lot of your metrics are going to be tied specifically to one of these three archetypes. If it's transactions, it's the volume of transactions going through the system, the size of those. If you're monetizing based on the size of the transaction, you're going to be looking at that to really understand business performance. If you're looking at productivity, typically, especially as of late, you're really providing that service as a subscription. So rather than necessarily measuring just your subscription volume, you're probably looking at something like engagement with your application. What are the things we think drives value or that helps us know that we're delivering value to a specific customer? How can we measure that? How can we improve that? So, some of that is product based. Some of that is, if you're a B2B sales organization, probably fine tuning who you're acquiring and who you're targeting to sell to, because there are some bad fits from a customer perspective where they're just not going to get value. So you're wasting your time and their time. But we'll kind of move on from that. I think you could probably explore that for a long time, but just trying to get some broad brushstrokes here of value streams. The other thing that I was thinking through, and this is definitely not like official terminology, is really just chunky versus creamy value streams. Okay, and this is a little bit of just a fun way of looking at how you deliver value and how kind of continuous that is. So a chunky value stream is going to be something that's infrequent or has a very specific discrete value over a point in time. And so the reason I call this out, a good example here might be, tax prep software, right? You do not need a subscription to tax prep software. The point in time that you need it is really April 15th or, this year a little bit later. But it's a very specific point in time. It's discrete. And if someone were to offer a subscription service for tax prep, really it would be hard to justify. It'd be hard to compete with that model just because it's so infrequent. It's so discrete. I wouldn't want to get into a commitment with tax prep software because, maybe next year I want to switch providers or what have you. But in any case, this kind of chunky value stream also applies to any, single purchase products. So if you're buying a pair of shoes, if you're buying, hardware, even if that is a large purchase, the point in time at which they're making the purchase and you're delivering the product is very discrete. Now, if you're looking at hardware today, iPhones, Android operating systems, a lot of those, you can say that those are continuous value streams, right? And I'm continuing to get value from it. But ultimately, what I'm getting value from is the services that are layered on top of that. And that's really where Apple's strategy specifically is kind of going, is to a more services-oriented revenue model. So they subsidize or at least sell at cost the actual hardware itself because they want to get you into the ecosystem and then sell you those services. So to counter a chunky value stream, let's look at like something that we would consider as a creamy value stream, or something that is very continuous. That could be your social media app. I get on it every day. I'm continually using it. I'm getting that value, whatever you want to describe there, if that's value or just distraction. But you can also use a B2B SaaS app that is kind of like just enabling core functionality for the business. So if you take something like, let's just use a local Atlanta company, Calendly. I'm continually using that to schedule my meetings with people. I've got a link out. It's continually up. I want that to be used frequently, often as that business, because I want them to continue to value the subscription. And so if you kind of look at this dimension as either very discrete or very continuous, you also see a lot of the parallels to how that is monetized and what the pricing and packaging looks like for that software. So, good example given there of kind of two ways of looking at value streams. I obviously probably tend to think more from the creamy or more continuous angle, just because most of the companies I've worked at have been subscription software companies. But I think if you look around, you certainly still see more discrete value streams that are being spun up and monetized. So another angle to look at value streams from is really your type of business. And you've got traditional, old school businesses. definitely more, chunky in general, right? I mean, they're typically producing some form of physical product. There may be they maybe have an IT organization that supports the business. It's not really seen as tech enabled. It's seen as IT is the facilitator for us to just do business, and we might outsource it. We might, purchase vendor software to enable the business, but it's not really seen as a core competency. It's seen as a cost of doing business. And if you think about those value streams, a lot of those are probably dying off, or at least shifting to a more tech-enabled business. If you think about what a tech-enabled business is, I think there are scarce resources and scarce things in the world that ultimately can't replicate the zero marginal cost model of pure technology. So to give an example, Uber is not a tech company, it is a tech-enabled company. Airbnb is not a tech company, it's a tech-enabled company. They have constraints in the real world that enable that value stream to be delivered to a customer. So Airbnb, for example, I think is a really good example right now. If you do not have demand or supply, that value stream is kind of shut off, right? And so really the technology is not delivering value if you don't have a B&B that can be sold. And so in those kinds of business models, there is some physical element that still needs to happen. Whereas in more pure technology services, you're kind of looking at almost pure information. An example there, Facebook, there's not really a limit to the amount of content that people can create. As long as people want to create it, they will. Information can be shared forever and continuously. There's no physical real world constraint that's keeping that business focused or constrained. And hopefully that makes sense. I could kind of dive into that a little bit more. I mean, I think this is a really important distinction. If you look at a lot of startups that, get overvalued, it's because they're viewed as a technology business rather than a tech-enabled business. The reason technology valuations get so really exaggerated is because of that just pure zero marginal cost view of software. We can build this once and sell it 1 billion times, and the second through the billionth unit cost us no more than the first to produce. So that's kind of where the distinction comes. I think there's a lot of context that goes into this. So kind of understanding whether your business is tech enabled or tech is probably, you are probably already aware of what it is. But it's important to recognize that in both of those models, technology is still seen as a core competency of the business. It's core to delivering the value. It's not just a cost of doing business or something we have to have. It is actually part of that value stream. So if we take a look at kind of what I call the value matrix and value domains, there's a lot of different ways you can slice this. This is just a simple way of looking at it. If you look at your business as comprised of capital and talent, we've got whatever capital we need to deliver value, whether that is even in a tech company. I would consider your software, your code base is your asset. It is your value factory. That is something that you must kind of recognize. Where are you positioned to succeed with that asset? Where are you positioned to do well in the market? And simultaneously, is the talent that you have fit to the work that you're doing? Do you have, if you're trying to do machine learning, are you staffed with people who have the relevant skill sets, whether it's engineering or product or the rest of the organization? Do you have the capabilities to deliver that value? And on the other side, in the customer, you've got, especially in B2C, specific demographics. You can slice customers up a bunch of different ways to see how they might be similar to each other. It's not a perfect slice. I would say, and caution, just because you found a demographic that finds value in your product doesn't mean everyone in that demographic will find value, and it certainly doesn't mean that there aren't other individuals outside of that demographic that would find value. But it's a brute force way of kind of grouping customers together. And on the B2B side, you have industries. What industries do we serve? Do we serve everyone? Do we serve specifically the construction industry, specific the hospitality industry? What industries do you serve? What are you targeting? Who is the identity of your customer? And in the middle is this fuzzy, cloudy area, which is the problem domain. And this is primarily driven by the context of the interactions that your customer has. What is your customer doing, and what is the context of that interaction that presents friction or presents some job that needs to be done? And I think the jobs to be done framework is really important. If you aren't aware of it, I would look it up. It's a better way of thinking about your problems, or the problems that you're solving for your customer, I should say, because it does have that sense of context associated with the problem. It's not just that if we're talking about demographics, I'm a 30-year-old who drives to work every day and lives in the city. It's that when I am driving to work in the morning, I need something to eat. I'm hungry and I don't have a lot of time. That's the context, right? I'm like, okay, I need that, right? And the classic example here is the job to be done for me is a quick breakfast replacement or a breakfast alternative. I don't have time to sit down and cook, full American breakfast where I've got pancakes, eggs, waffles, so on and so forth. I need something quick and easy. And this is where, in the past, solutions that may not have been seen originally as a good fit are identified as actually being a great solution for this context. And the example here is McDonald's milkshakes, typically seen as a dessert. If you position it as a breakfast replacement, it's not a milkshake anymore, it's a breakfast smoothie, for example. Now I'm thinking about my problem in that context, and I want that to solve it. So that's kind of the jobs to be done in a nutshell. You can, again, do another complete session on just jobs to be done. But the reason that this is important is because context continually changes. And I think especially now, we've seen an example of drastic context shifts. There have been critical changes in behavior, not only just in customers, but in how we interact in general as a society. And those things shift where we can find successful value streams. Our goal really as a product company is to find a way to connect our business to specific customers in a way that delivers value. That is the value stream. And the context of the problem domain is what we are navigating constantly to figure out how we can deliver value. How do we take this capital or this code base or this factory or these tools that we have, paired with the talent of the people that run this business, to deliver value? And that is really just solving problems for customers. At the end of the day, that is what you're doing. That is what they're paying you for. And if you do that well, you will continue to thrive. So that's kind of the reason I say a value matrix is because this problem domain is really constantly shifting. If you look at Michael Porter's 5 forces, I think those are a good example of how this context can shift. And if you're not familiar with that, there might be new entrants to the market. There's rivalrous behavior between competitors in the existing market. So that's part of the context. Your buyers might have specific purchasing power. They might have leverage. Your suppliers, the ones that are enabling you to do business, might have leverage and kind of control how you can navigate. But overall, that kind of dynamic set of forces is constraining what options you actually have in positioning your product. And since that's kind of always changing, you also have to evolve as a business to figure out, where do we need to play? What do we need to do? And this is the kind of the foundational setting for how do we devise a strategy, right? How do we choose what value domains and what value streams we are going to produce as a firm. So this kind of maps to the concept of vision as well. And I know that there was some interest in kind of exploring vision and communicating vision to your team, which again could be an entire session on its own. But the way to think about it is, as leaders of your company, you should be thinking about the problem domain and how that is changing over time. This is just a very simple visualization, but today we're kind of in this green problem domain, and this is the context, and we start to see hints of change happening, and over time we kind of see that trend towards a completely different context, a completely different way that our customers need us to solve problems, and it might make our existing business completely unviable. We have to evolve as the problem domain evolves in order to continue servicing that value stream to customers. It may be the same value stream. It may be that we have to deprecate that value stream and build something completely new. But both of those things are options on the table. At the end of the day, what we as leaders need to identify is, what does our business need to look like? What is the talent that we need to have supporting our business? What do we need to have from a capital perspective in order to succeed in that problem domain? How do we pair those things together? How do we do enough R&D now to even identify where the problem domain's going? And how do we build that asset, that software asset, if we're a technology company, that will enable us to deliver value in that context? And ultimately, what you're looking to do is communicate the reasons for those investments today and what you believe is going to happen in the problem domain in the market overall. And that might be sharing, information that you're gleaning about competitive moves. We're seeing investment from Google in the payment space, for example. That might change our decisions and what we believe about the future. Where do we think the problem domain is going? Whatever it might be, you need to communicate that as part of your vision to justify why you're making those investments now, how you believe your value streams need to be structured, and how you believe those need to change, or how they interact with your business needs to change in order for you to succeed in the future. And so this is kind of where we evaluate. Probably the best example is, March, I think it was 13th, drastic changes in customer behavior, both B2B, B2C. The context was a critical shift. Normally, you see trends. Mary Meeker puts out her internet trends report every year, and you see, mobile's continuing to drive adoption. Internet adoption is kind of plateauing. We're kind of seeing these things and a macro perspective, and they're helping us inform kind of the more near term, the 3-month, the 6-month strategy. But with this type of change, it was a critical shift in context. It happened. It's kind of like a binary switch. It just said, we're completely different now. That can disrupt value streams. What you did yesterday and what you do today may no longer be valuable to the customer at all. And it's a really hard place to be because it feels unfair. It feels, it's definitely sad to see this happen. But what you have to understand is that adaptability is key to surviving these kinds of context shifts. You have to be able to adapt to it. Now, there are some businesses who simply can't adapt. There is no way to change their business and how they connect value to the customer, whether that's because their capital investments have been misaligned, or they're inflexible, they don't have the right talent for the new problem domain, whatever it is. There might be inflexibility there, but if you can adapt, that's really just identifying what does the customer need now, what is the problem domain that we're trying to kind of play in, what are our pivot points, and how can we navigate in such a way that we're able to deliver value to that customer. So this kind of gets down to, how do you structure your team to provide that flexibility? Why is it that when we talk with Marty Kagan and Rich Mironov, they say empowered teams are better at innovating, at adapting, at driving the business forward? Part of that is going to be just the friction that is created in a command and control environment. If you have a go forth and execute this plan model, There are certainly cases and examples where that works, but there are many, many examples where it doesn't. And I think what you end up seeing is that if your decision rights are not down in the trenches, if you don't have individual autonomous teams, you lose a lot of the direct connection with that problem domain and the context. You don't have direct insight into the customers. You're not listening to the feedback every day. You're not in the weeds understanding what you need to do to keep that value stream alive. And it's the worst case for this is when it's not even, a team's not aligned to a value stream, but it's just kind of this asterisk, changing projects every 2 months, right? Like, oh, we want you to go build this new thing. Don't worry about that. We built it. It's done. Now go do this other thing. It's not related. The context isn't the same. You're not getting any knowledge or deep knowledge of that problem domain. You're really just bouncing around and executing. Really, really bad, because what you want to have, and the ideal here, and this is not common, right? This is nirvana. This is the ideal state, is your teams are directly connected to a specific value stream. They are figuring out how to connect the business to the customer, how to deliver on that value stream, and how to navigate that changing problem domain at a very close micro level. And the leader is responsible for really taking a step back and saying, what value streams as a business do we need to focus on? Where do we play? What capital do we need to have to support this? What talent do we need to go out and hire to structure ourselves this way? But what value streams do we need to focus on? And let the individual product teams answer the question of what should we build? Now, you can provide smart constraints as a leader. You can say, it's not just, go out and do this and tell us what you did in 3 months. It's, hey, this is your value stream. And this is where we're trying to go. This is the vision we have for where the market's going. This is where this value stream we think needs to be. Now, the how we get there is kind of up to you. Maybe we know we need to get our costs down, otherwise we won't be able to survive. Or maybe we know we need to move into a certain demographic or a certain industry. But the how you do that is what an individual product team should be answering. They should be given the problem to solve, not the solution to build. And in this model, each of the individual product teams routinely is asking, what should we build? And because it's kind of a more continuous form of development, if you look at Agile and kind of what the spirit of Agile is, it is we are every 2 weeks figuring out the answer to the question of what should we build next? Should we continue to iterate on the thing that we've been building towards? Or in the context of, March 13th, coronavirus hits and everything changes. Maybe that thing we were solving before is no longer relevant in this problem domain. We should scrap it. Sunk cost fallacy aside, we say, oh, we've put time and effort into this, but it's no longer worthwhile to pursue. Let's go solve the problems that exist in the new context. Now, that's not to say it's immediately relevant or available information, right? It's not like we can just look out and say, obviously, that's what we need to do. But there's discovery to be done when context shifts in that dramatic of a fashion. You need to go out and understand what is the new normal for your customers. What problems do they now have in the new context that they didn't have before? I think a good example of this is you look at something like Eventbrite, whose primary business was modeled around having in-person events, again, transactional business. The more events that they facilitated through the platform, the more tickets they sold, the more money they made, and that just completely dropped to nothing, right? But what you started to see, much like we did at Product404, there were virtual events coming to kind of the front and center. So rather than that being more of a secondary model, a less than ideal form of having an event, it became the only way to have an event. And so when you think about that problem domain from an Eventbrite perspective, you quickly start to think, okay, well, as a event planner, I need to make it really, really easy for people to connect to the event, to know the event link, not be searching through emails, not be trying to find that link to join or a password. It needs to be very simple, right? And that's a problem that Eventbrite may have prioritize solving. I believe that they've done some work there to make that better. But a lot of what I think they focused on was also like, how do we make it easy to get refunds for events that aren't happening, which is surely a pain point, especially if people were buying tickets and having those refunded. But I think what you start to see is that change in context also present a lot of opportunity for new startups. So, there are a lot of new, I would say, using Zoom as a platform, a lot of second layer companies that are trying to ease the friction of managing events online and connecting people with these virtual events. And maybe it's, in virtual events, I don't feel like in Zoom that I have the same level of networking capability. I feel like, there's 20 people on a call. We have to kind of wait our turn and have those conversations as a 20-person group, rather than, if we were out at an event or at dinner, we could kind of break off into these smaller groups more naturally and just kind of merge and interact. And so maybe that's a new problem that someone's going to solve, right? The problem domain has drastically shifted. People still want to network. People still want to connect with each other. How do you enable that, right? And so again, kind of going off on a tangent there, but you can kind of see where if someone's value stream was specifically focused on that problem, right? We're targeting, people's ease of accessing the event, or the ability to organize it without friction, or the ability to access it as a participant without friction. If that was a value stream that had been identified, they were investing in that product manager's job would be to clearly say, this is no longer relevant anymore. What we were doing in a in-person event world, we need to completely shift and start focusing technology on this other problem. And that's the level of autonomy and adaptability that structure ultimately gives you, and why it's kind of valuable. And so, thinking about how value streams evolve, where are you in your business life cycle? What are you trying to do? If you're going out and finding product market fit, you're really exploring the problem domain. You are trying to find a way to connect the business to the customer in a viable way. You're testing and trying to see, does this pierce through that product domain, that context to drive value to the customer? Are we able to make money on this? You're looking for it. Once you find it, once you have product market fit, you're probably investing in that. You're saying, we want to actually deliver value here, but at some point you're going to say, we have to start doing other things. We need to expand. We can't just do this one thing. Customers are asking us for all these other things because they have other contexts that we need to solve for, and so we actually have to expand out. Obviously, you don't want to do too many things. You don't want to expand too many ways, because then you don't really get any depth in the value streams that you're investing in. But you need to evaluate ways that you can expand. What are your options? What options are on the table, and which one's worth investing in, or at least seeing if you can kind of build a value stream that way. You probably then, once you've kind of built a solid base, are going to saturate that, right? You're going to continue to invest in that core. Invest in those value streams you've identified. The way that I've kind of modeled it out here is, at least the way that I've seen a lot of subscription businesses go, is when you throw out a value stream and you find a connection to a core problem. This is something that a lot of people have. What you start to see is like, I have that problem, but I also have this context, and it's not shared with everyone. Maybe I'm in a specific industry, or I have a specific, need in a certain demographic. But there's kind of like these ancillary value streams. And as a business, you don't want to ignore those per se. You might do some things that help solve those problems in a small way. You expand to serve a lot of different customers in a tiny way, because you've got the core value. They value that, they see benefit coming from that, but they just need a couple of other things to make it work for them. It might be competitors that force you to expand into those spaces. It might just be like they need a good enough solution. But once you've kind of got that expansion set, you're going to continue to saturate that, right? And at a certain point, you're going to say, this is no longer viable. Either the market has changed, the context has changed, our business has changed. We want to focus in a certain area. We can no longer split our focus. Then you're going to look at exapting. And exaptation is the best way to describe it is almost like a adaptive evolution. So we used to have this one thing for this purpose, but what we've identified is an opportunity to shift what we do and reuse that in a new way. It solves a problem, but it's not the original problem we set out to solve. And we actually think that new thing is worth it. So you might kill old ancillary value streams, and your core business might completely change. You might diminish your presence in that core problem domain and go out with a new value stream, or focus on an area of your business that used to be ancillary but now is becoming core. And this kind of value stream evolution is really, at the end of the day, critical to innovating and remaining relevant as a business. If your company wants to persist for a long time, you need to continually be identifying ways that you can explore new problem domains, create new value streams, reuse what you already have, because you're building this business. You've got a bunch of capital, whether it's human capital or a technology asset. You've got these things, and you don't want to just continually reinvent that, right? You don't want to build a new business every week, every month, every year. You want to use what you have to deliver value and effectively sustain the business, make money, a profit ideally. So ultimately, that's kind of like how I see value streams evolving. There's a lot of different models for this. This certainly isn't like the one and true way. If you look at like product portfolio management and the theory behind that, that's kind of like how you do this at scale. But I think really the reason why this is a relevant topic is in technology, we are constantly hitting that context domain shift. We're constantly seeing stuff change. New technology comes out. There's a new device. There's Apple's on. Apparently the next thing is Apple Glass, right? So they kind of stole the name from Google Glasses. Google did it too early, but Apple's going to do it now, and you're going to have full augmented reality in the glasses. And that is a change in the problem domain space. That is a context shift, right? Because now maybe I don't need screens anymore. I don't need things like that, because in augmented reality, I can just have a screen pop up wherever I'm at. I don't need to carry it with me if my my glasses can kind of project a screen everywhere. And if that ends up working and people adopt it, well, how does that change how I interact with that? How does that change the problems I run into, right? Those kinds of things ultimately require the ability for a business to figure out how can we maintain this relationship with the customers we have today, or reuse what we have to find new customers. And that is ultimately acceptation. That is figuring out how to survive as best you can as a business in different contexts. So I've got this last slide, which is kind of just white space for anything that I wanted to draw or cover. I'm not sure that there is anything that I haven't covered other than potentially what you need to focus on as a leader. And I think at the end of the day, it really just depends. Strategy is multidimensional. It requires not just understanding your customer, the problem domain, planning out in advance forecasting, modeling how the business would evolve if you were to hold some assumptions true, build a product, serve it to that customer, and just cross your fingers and hope that the problem domain doesn't change in the time it takes to build that. But it also requires you to take a good hard look at your culture as a business. Do you have the right people, and are they working together the right way to deliver the value that you're trying to deliver? I think there's kind of a desire to believe that if you plan it and design the strategy, that it will just execute or be executed by whoever you throw at it. And that really just isn't true. If you look at most venture capital funds, when they are looking at investing in a new company, they're not necessarily looking at the idea. They're not saying, oh, this is a great idea, no one's ever thought of this. At the end of the day, they probably won't even sign an NDA because they don't care. They see a million ideas A lot of them are the same idea. What they care about is investing in a team that can execute that. Do they have the right competencies? Do they have the track record of success? Do we believe they have the experience to do this, or that they can quickly get the experience? It's really more so a multi-layered problem that they're trying to figure out is this the team that's going to do that? And is that market worth the risk? Is there enough upside there? At the end of the day, there's a lot of problems that just don't have a whole lot of benefit to solving. You can hear a customer's problem, and if they say it would be nice to have, or it would be neat if you all did X, Y, Z, that probably is not a really painful part of their day. It's not a painful problem that they're immediately looking for a solution to. So it's something that you constantly have to be mindful of in developing a strategy, especially if you're doing it for your overall business. What trends do you believe are out there? How do you believe things are changing? At the end of the day, it's listening to the customers and understanding what problems they have, figuring out with your team. Maybe one thing that I can kind of go over here is just how your teams might be structured, or how at least I've been thinking about structuring teams to solve problems. If we take I'm trying to think of a good example of a business that we can kind of dissect. Let's see. Let's try doing maybe DoorDash, right? Just because it's kind of super relevant right now. We'll do kind of a quick value stream analysis here. So value streams that DoorDash has, just going to kind of like off the top of my head, they are really a B to B to C. So they work both the business and the consumer side. Transactional. They are looking to drive as many deliveries as they can. Where do their costs come from? Probably marketing. Selling. They've got to sell to the business. The technology to connect, and then the actual delivery outsourcing, right? So they've got a bunch of people who are driving around in cars taking food to homes. And so the value stream to the consumer is, food, delivery. You can probably break that down further. Let's see, maybe food discovery. And we'll say to the business, it's probably similar, right? So food discovery is probably both for the consumer and the business. Businesses want to be discovered. Consumers want to discover new food options. So that's kind of a two-sided piece. If it really depends on how you want to, how much capacity you have as a team, right? So if we've got a ton of engineers and we're investing a lot, we might split discovery into the business side and the consumer side. How do we make it really easy for consumers to find new places to eat? How do we personalize their discovery experience? How do we say, like, okay, Kent really likes Indian food. He eats a lot of chicken tikka masala, which is very true. What are other things that he might like based on our wealth of data, and start hitting me with those when I come into the app and I say, oh yeah, I do like Indian, but there's Thai food here, and wouldn't it be nice if I had that today because I want to mix it up, right? So the food discovery for a consumer, whereas the food discovery for a business is how do we provide metrics to businesses that are on the DoorDash platform to say, you are being discovered by this many people, or we have packages to help promote your business to our consumers, and we kind of monetize that way, right? It's important to maybe split that value stream, because one is being delivered to the consumer, one is being delivered to the businesses that are on your platform. And so in an ideal world, right, you've got unlimited resources, you probably split those value streams up. If you don't have unlimited resources and you need to solve a bunch of problems just for the business to exist, maybe you have a food discovery team or a discovery team, and they are doing both sides. They make it easy for the consumer and solve the problem for the business. So we got food delivery, food discovery, probably some amount of just kind of like internal tooling to keep the business up and running. And so this might be articulated as, internal to DoorDash, which is probably the marketing tech selling side. But there is that kind of delivery outsourcing piece. And so they might consider that an internal tool, or they might consider it, fleet management or something like that, right? How do we incentivize people to deliver things on the DoorDash platform? And actually, I'm not sure, I'm not as familiar with DoorDash as I am with Uber Eats or Postmates or something like that. But I'm not exactly sure if they pay the delivery people directly, if they have their own fleet, but I imagine not. I imagine it is the same kind of Uber Eats model of I want to deliver on this platform, and I'm just kind of like hunting down a gig, right? So I've got like an app where I get hit with deliveries I need to go pick up, and kind of navigational stuff to take me where I need to go. So those are all different value streams that we need to service effectively in order for the business to operate. And so, as a leader for DoorDash, I'd be looking at, okay, where is food delivery going? Where is food discovery going? Are we still positioned as a business to do food discovery, or are people finding where they want to eat elsewhere and just coming to our platform to order, right? And so you're probably going to see a split from a discovery perspective. There might be some applications that are trying to do all-in-one, fully integrated. You do discovery on our platform, we deliver it. It's kind of an end-to-end process. You might have a discovery engine with individual kind of enablement tools on the business side. So let's say Facebook somehow becomes the ideal food discovery platform. We know all this data about you. We also know what you like to eat. And Facebook's going to make it super easy to find a place to eat. When you find it, it is enabled by delivery technology. It's a B2B product, more so than a B2B2C. Maybe there's some amount of delivery outsourcing there, but maybe the restaurant or a cloud kitchen has their own delivery services. And really what we're just enabling is the ability for the consumer to order at that restaurant. And so the business completely changes, our strategy completely changes, the assets, the technology assets, and the human capital we need all completely change in that model. We as leaders should be evaluating, where is the food delivery business going, right? How is delivery changing? How is discovery changing? Is it even viable to outsource delivery anymore? Are people getting tired of the gig economy? It's not, it's not economical to service. If you look at DoorDash in general, they have a huge challenge in getting businesses on the platform. They effectively have to get some sketchy business development deals in place. At least I consider them sketchy. Where they kind of hijack listings and put a DoorDash or delivery button on the business listing, whether that's a Google or a Yelp. They get the DoorDash button in before the business has even made a relationship with them. DoorDash is scraping their menu, and what they're doing is trying to subsidize orders. They're saying, we'll get you that chicken tikka masala for $14 instead of $18. Consumers purchase through that button on the internet. And then DoorDash takes that to the business and says, hey, we've got all of these orders that we have enabled for you. You could be on the DoorDash platform directly, and we can give you more discovery capabilities. We are going to sell DoorDash to you by taking that data. And so that's how they're enabling that. They're spending a lot of money to be able to do that in subsidizing those orders. If you look at the bottom line, a lot of businesses like this are not making a profit still because they're so competitive right now that they've driven costs below any kind of reasonable price they can charge for it, or it's driven costs above that, right? And so, again, a little bit of a tangent, but if you think about where their value streams are, it is likely that people determine the model as it currently exists is not viable. And these problems break up into value streams that can be viable, right? So food delivery, it's not going anywhere. People have that problem. Someone's going to figure out a way to monetize that, but it may not be this fully integrated platform. It might be a more modular approach where each piece of that can be, kind of assembled together or configured in such a way that it's economical for that specific business, that specific restaurant. Their costs and their ability to profit are probably going to factor into whether they put more investment in the technology solutions to enable that. I mean, if you look at, I was talking to one of my colleagues the other day about Domino's and how Domino's has transitioned from a traditional pizza company to a tech-enabled pizza company, and really it's not just pizza anymore; it's just a tech-enabled brand. They have invested a lot in their own technology rather than partnering with these outside platforms. And that, I think, is ultimately where we're going to see a lot of businesses going when they're looking at their value streams. They're going to say, we need to be able to deliver on this value stream, and it is not economical to work with these these platforms that essentially squeeze every ounce of profit out of this business. We have to invest in our own technology as a pizza company or as a fast food chain, whatever it is. They're going to begin to own their own technology and build up that competency within themselves. I mean, I think you can see Chick-fil-A doing that with their mobile app and their kind of curbside experience. If you've gone to a Chick-fil-A in the post-corona world, you've seen that they've really effectively moved to that curbside model. You can order, you can go, you can pick it up, you can say where you're at, and people will bring it out to you. They did that because they have the technology to adapt. They're not throwing out a janky curbside pickup phone number sign outside the business and kind of just trying to make it work. They have technology solutions that can help them adapt. So a little bit of a rant there towards the end. Hopefully that whiteboard session example at the end was somewhat helpful, just to kind of think how you can approach a business and understand what their value streams are, how you can kind of start piecing it together. If it's not helpful, or if you have different opinions about how DoorDash works, I mean, I certainly don't know the intimates of their business model and how they've been performing, but just as a passive observer, can kind of piece together some of those things that they would need to be thinking through. Something I wanted to do was also just kind of point to a couple of books, depending on where you're specifically finding problems. If you are trying to figure out how to structure your team to a specific value stream, Marty Kagan recommended this book. I read it. It's phenomenal. Great way of thinking about business and technology teams. Team Topologies recommended it. It essentially says, depending on what your constraints are, what type of industry you work in, these are how you might structure value streams, not just for delivering value to customers, but delivering value to your development team. DevOps and kind of some of those more recent evolutions in the technology business are all incredibly important for making sure you can continue to deliver value very, very quickly. Innovators Dilemma goes through a little bit of that value stream evolution and how context can completely shift. Examples from the Innovators Dilemma might be like Intel getting out of its prior business and completely killing that off and moving into kind of the modern era Intel, which is microprocessor fabrication and technologies there. Strategy Safari, rather than a more focused lens on technology, is just a broader strategic framework or exploration of different frameworks. It is probably just, it's very thick, but it is a great analysis of all of the strategic business thinking that has kind of happened over the past 50, 60 years. And the way that it breaks it down, it kind of says, here are pros and cons to this approach to strategy. And ultimately, TLDR at the end of the day, you have to be able to dance between those different types of strategic development in order to succeed. Strategy Safari is just a nice way to explore all of them, all the ways I might approach strategy in solving a problem, and the thinking behind it. Why do people believe that? How might it work? And Blue Ocean Strategy, I think that this is a great book for really anyone in the technology space who's looking not to, build commodity tech products. Really, it's business in general, but how do we deliver value streams that aren't easily replicated or that are differentiated in some way? How do we think through our product and really make our solution unique, something that is targeted towards a specific customer in a specific problem domain in a way that is maybe more innovative than other companies, but is unique to our business, unique to what we believe, and unique to how we are going to deliver this value stream to the market. Hope those books are helpful recommendations. Again, depending on what you're explicitly going through right now, you might find one of these more interesting than the other, but all of these are kind of useful in thinking about, how might we organize our value streams or strategize around delivering these to the market. And that's all I got. So hopefully that was helpful. This was a kind of like a 2-hour quick think through of how I might go through this topic. So hopefully it was not just a complete ramble all over the place. But please do share feedback. Let me know how and if this was helpful, or if it wasn't quite exactly what you were looking for, what I should change so that it can be useful in the future. But if it was helpful, again, let me know so that I know it's worth doing again. Thanks, and hopefully we'll see each other in person soon.